So the first thing we want to do is reshow our reference, go to our front view, go back to wireframe. We're going to zoom in just a little bit, and we'll make this, this central piece here first. So I'm just going to add mesh cylinder. I'm going to change it to 8 vertices, and I'm going to rotate in 90 degrees in X. And from there, I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm just going to change to my scale tool and just scale it down. Roughly get it to the size that I'm kind of looking for. And I'll go to my perspective view just to see if it's in the right spot, which it is not. Yep. So it doesn't need to be too big, just big enough to house those pieces that come off of it. So what I want to do now is just like I did with the other pieces, is just clean it up a bit and deal with these normals here. So I know that we don't need this back side, so we can get rid of that back face. And we want to enclose this. So with the face selected, I'm going to inset faces again, and I'm going to go up to mesh, merge at center. And lastly, we just want to get rid of these hard lines here. So I'm just going to right click, shade smooth, auto smooth, 180, and then with my edge selection on, I'm going to double click the edge. It will select all the edge, and I'm just going to right click and mark sharp. And there we are. So another thing I kind of like to do is whenever you have a low poly mesh like this, even though we're going to be really far out from it, just to add a bit of variation to it, you can just add a little bit of rotate, just so it's a bit off center. Not absolutely necessary, but I feel like it might just add that little bit more realism. Great, so let's go ahead and start making the handles. So we'll go back to our front view. I'll go back to wireframe, and there's quite a few things still here, so I might hide a few of these things. So I'm going to hide that cylinder and the spikes and there. So we don't really need that, but I'm going to leave it in place anyway. So to make these shapes, I'm probably just going to use a cube. Let's give that a go. It's massive. I am happy with its creation though, so I'll just go to my scale tool and just scale it down roughly into place. It's very roughly the size I want it to be, and I'll scale it in every way that I feel is necessary. So what I might do is I might just change the origin here to the center grid. Again, I'm just going to go increment absolute grid and just change it to the absolute grid. Great, so now when I rotate it and scale it, it scales from that exact center, which is very useful. So the other thing, actually no, that's just fine. So one thing I might as well mention here, you might notice that when I rotate this and I move to my scale tool, that this scale axes are still pointed in these kind of absolute directions. To change it so that it points down the direction of the object itself, you can change this transform orientation from global to local. You can see how it shifts where those handles sit, which can be super useful, and we'll see why that's super useful in just a second. So roughly like that. And from here, I'm going to start adding some edge loops. So I'm going to go to edge selection, and I'm going to go over here to the loop cut, and wherever I kind of want to cut, so it's incrementing here, so I can turn this off. I'll undo that and try again. You can just left click and slide along here just to add them exactly where you want these. So I'm going to add one at the top and the bottom of this circular shape here, one in the center, a couple on the outside, and I might revisit the rest of the shape in just a second. So for now, I'm going to change to my vertex selection. Oops, I'm going to make sure I'm in select mode, and then I'm going to go to my scale here, and notice that because I changed my orientation, it's now pointed relative to the rotation of the object. If we still had it in global, it would look like this, and when I try to scale it, it would scale in very funky ways that we don't want. So if we change this to local, sometimes you might need to change to normal as well, but that's going to be on a case-by-case basis. In this case, local works just fine, so when I scale it, it scales out from the direction of that rotation of the main object, which is super useful. The other thing is, sorry, let's just do the rest here first. Just kind of roughly where we want them to be. Again, these are going to be very small, so the object itself isn't very big. I'm going to try to maximize what we're seeing here. And that's probably good for that. But I do know that this ends in a tip, so I'm going to just scale that in a bit. There we are. So that's probably good enough for that. Let's have a look. And let's have a look in context with the rest of the mesh. Let's put the face on. There we are. So we do not have it selected. And it's not in the right place, so let's drag it out. Roughly there. Great. I think that looks pretty good. Alright, so before I go ahead and clean this up and do my normals, let's just go ahead and make the other hand. So I go front view, and instead of recreating all this, I'm going to use this piece as a base, so I'm just going to duplicate, right click, rotate. Great. So all I need to do here is play around with where my vertex are sitting. So it's hard to make out in this low resolution what's actually happening with this shape. But it looks like there's a bit of a bulge here, and then it goes flat again around about there. Whoops, too much selected. Yeah, maybe something like that. Great. So I'll go into my perspective view again. And one thing I definitely want to do is to have these not sitting on exactly the same plane, so that if you were to rotate them, they wouldn't just collapse into each other. Cool. Awesome. So looking pretty nice. So let's just quickly go in and clean this up. So there's a really neat trick. If we hold Control F, it hides everything that's not selected, right? Which is super useful for when we want to just play around with whatever we're seeing. So again, I'm not going to want these back faces. So if I go to face, I can just go ahead and select these. Delete faces. So I don't want this bottom face either, because it goes into the center. And I do want the top one because there are chances that might be seen. Very unlikely, but it might be seen. So again, let's go ahead, right click, shade smooth, set auto smooth, make it 180. And then go ahead and go in and define our hard edges. So I want all of these to be hard edges. I think I pretty much want almost everything that's not this center row to be hard edges. So I think that's everything. So let's mark sharp and take a look. I think we could probably get away with these edges being sharp as well. Yeah, great. All right, so let's Control F, and that will bring everything back. We'll select the other one, Control F, and press regular F, and then we'll just do the same exact thing. So let's take away the faces we don't need first. We don't need this inside face. And let's go back to Object, Shade Smooth, Auto Smooth, 180. And what I'm going to do So I'm going to go to edge and select all the edges I want to be hard again. So in this case, just these bottom ones and those. So let's mark sharp. And I think that's everything. Great. And Control F. And there we are. So just before we finish, let's just go ahead and name our new meshes. So we have this clock, face, center. We'll call this the minute hand. Did I spell that right? Yep, that's good. And this last one will be our clock hour.